Coming up on the HR Big Meat podcast.
It's the single biggest thing that's happened to me that totally changed how I work, who I am, what I do. My life would not look like it does today if that hadn't happened to me. So, yeah, in a nutshell, I got unceremoniously let go from a role that I had somehow wrapped my entire identity in an organization that I'd worked for over a decade. And, that in itself, okay, losing a job is never fun. It's always difficult. But I didn't have any warning. Technically a redundancy, but because I was based in the US, there's no such thing as redundancy. So it was just like getting fired.
Welcome to the HR Big Meat podcast. This is the place where we amplify the voices of women in HR and have honest conversations about what it really means to work in this profession so that nobody has to internalise the idea that they are the problem. We are all about you having sustainable impact without compromise, so expect real stories, just a smattering of swear words, and a few uncomfortable truths. Oh, and everything that you'd hope from something that is proudly not like normal HR. Are you ready to be humans resourced? Great, let's jump right in. In today's episode, I am joined by a woman who, a lot like me, has built a reputation for saying the things everyone is thinking but won't always say out loud themselves. Of course, it is the one and only Kirsty Morgan, who is a strategy coach and consultant, founder of Evolving HR, and after nearly 3 decades in the profession has accumulated much wisdom, brilliant stories, and of course, a healthy dose of cynicism. In this conversation, we talk about the moment she unexpectedly lost a role she'd wrapped her entire identity around, and how it forced her to rethink confidence, authenticity, and what we're willing to tolerate at work. If you've ever wondered whether you're being resilient or simply putting up with too much, this one is for you. Oh, nice to see you, Kirsty. Thank you for coming along and chatting with me. I'm stuck with you now, right? I think you're just like a staple part of my life.
I'm a piece of furniture. Yes.
You're a piece of furniture.
I'm too heavy to remove, so I'm stuck there. You can't get rid of me.
Stuck for life, which is absolutely fine by me. Because I've got a
same. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I've got a lot to be thankful for from you, because we first met virtually back in, I think it was 2021, and it's now 2026.
Crikey.
Yeah,
so I think it would have been 2021. Yeah.
21. It was the latter part of 2021. And you put a post out that said, I work with HR people, but I'm not for everyone. So it was along these lines. I can't remember exactly the words.
Yeah.
So here are a load of other people who are also working with HR professionals. Why don't you follow them all and see who your kind of vibe is? And that for me was such a pivotal thing, because not least because of what we went on to do, we'll get onto that, but just because of your spirit of collaboration. That for me was, I'd not been long out of employment myself then, so I left in February. You must have put that post out around October, November time of that year. And I was like, what's this? What's going on? Why is someone who's like my competitor, doing something so, I don't know, inclusive, or why would my competitor talk about me in her own marketing, which is essentially what we both use LinkedIn for, right? So, you shifted a lot of things for me in that very one post. And I know I talk about it all the time, but
no, I'm super glad. And yet, I think it's one of these things. I think anybody who runs their own business will have those wobbles occasionally where they do think that other people are their competitors. But I like to try and remind myself that there are literally millions of people working in HR in the world. And most of us could only work with, 20 to 30 people in a year. I mean, let's say at a stretch, you might work with 50 people in a year. That's not even one snowflake on the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There is genuinely room for more people to support the HR profession. And at that time in 2021, there weren't many. I always talk about Julie Turney and Kelly Swingler, probably the OGs in terms of providing coaching support or that kind of thing for other HR professionals. Claire Roberts was doing it not that long after that, but most people who are doing it now started doing it post-COVID.
Yeah.
So I remember digging around trying to find other people, and that was the list of names that I put out there. And most of you, like me, I mean, I was still ahead of HR in 2021. I didn't leave that job until 2023. So I was doing the coaching piece on the side. So that takes down, the number of people I could potentially work with. That takes down even lower. So why would you not make it available to other people and give them their options? And it's funny, isn't it? Because when you think about what I'm doing now with Evolving, everything is about giving people options around solutions for them or for their roles or for their organizations, because I just feel like it's important to share that stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's amazing. And like I say, such a shift for me from how it is, or my experience in corporate, which tended to be like quite competitive, quite individualistic, kind of, you know, pitted against each other, and whether real or perceived, that was my experience. So that was an eye opener. And 2021, like, that was a big year of like need for HR, wasn't it? Coming out of
Oh my God,
COVID.
yeah. I mean, we were still having lockdowns in 2021, and a lot. Then there was the whole, like, when is it okay to go back to the office, and do we actually want to go back to the office? And all of that stuff was coming in for the first time. That huge debate that has actually changed the face of corporate life completely, and thank God for that.
Yeah.
But there was a lot going on, a lot.
And I remember at the
Interesting.
time, like, kind of searching for well-being for HR, and everything that came up was, how does HR do well-being for other people? There was
Still does.
well, it still does.
Yeah.
It's reassuring now that 5 years down the line there are more of us doing this work.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was very much like, yeah, anything you search for, and it was always, hey, how do you do HR for other people? And that's something
100%.
also we've got in common, isn't it? Because we're like, no,
Yeah.
we need to support
It's
ourselves too.
something that drives me mad. And it's the same with, so every year I run an HR wellbeing survey, and every time I'm looking for, the examples of that, it's never about us. It's never about us. It's always
No.
about our organizations, which is fine. But yeah, I still think that's why, we joke about the collaboration, the competition thing. The fact that you Google it and nothing comes up shows there's still plenty of room for people out
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah, right. Yeah,
absolutely, because
totally.
it's not the first thing that people think of. They all think about how are you going to fix things for everybody else, and it's not just around well-being, is it? It's about everything. It's about development. Like, if you look up HR development, other than the professional qualifications, most of the time it comes up with the development that you can provide for people in your organization, rather than
Yeah.
anything for you. Yeah.
And we were both frustrated by that, I think it's fair to
Just a
say.
tad, yeah.
Just a tad. And so our story started, well, we're together, working together on an event which was online.
Yes.
And I'll have pre-framed at some point that there's swear words in this because it's me. But our event was called Where the Fuck Is My Oxygen Mask? Which was such a good name. And it was so big. So that name was, it was Lorraine. Lorraine
It was
Ivan came
Lorraine,
up with that
yeah.
name. She's Scottish. I'll have her on as a guest at some point. And just saying it, where the fuck is my oxygen mask, in a Scottish accent, is just better. It's just better.
We had been faffing around with like suggested titles for a while, and that one just kind of cut through it. And we were like, actually, yes, why not? Because we're telling everybody that we want to say what we mean. We're telling everybody that we want to be ourselves and be authentic. So that is about as authentic as it gets.
Right. And wasn't that so much fun? I think we
Oh
had
my
in the end like
God.
600 registrations globally for that.
Yeah,
About 100
yeah,
came live at the
yeah.
time. And that essentially was what has formed the HR Club, the HR Big Meet, kind of the in-person event, which was all around, I suppose, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from that event was people were so grateful that we were saying out loud the things that they didn't think that they could say out loud,
Yeah.
like our stories of of illness and of what the job had kind of made us feel like, and on our stories of leaving it and all the conflicts that we felt we were in, and all
Yeah.
you know, all of that stuff. And the messages that we got afterwards was like,
God.
do you remember? Do any stand out from you for what?
There was a lot of just thank you for
Yeah,
saying it. Thank you. And I think the most common thread to them all was I always thought it was just me.
yeah,
And this has made me realize that it's not. And
yeah,
I thought, and then my work here is done. Because I think that's one of the
yeah,
things we wanted to draw attention to was it's not just you and you don't have to suffer it alone.
yeah,
You can still love working in HR. You can still have a very rewarding career, but there's an awful lot of shit that you shouldn't have to put up with. And we're just here to tell you that, and
yeah,
that you can share it with other people.
yeah.
So I feel like it made an impact on people. I feel like it helped. And that felt a bit good, didn't it?
It felt really good, and
Plus you had a DJ. I mean, come on.
there was a DJ,
Yeah.
and that has very much informed, like I say, the HR Big Me of, if you can have that much impact just through sharing stories, then why don't we
Mm,
share our stories more often? And that's one
yeah.
of the things that drives me, is like, no one should be internalizing
Mm,
all this stuff as a them issue, that it's a problem that they've created or that they have to fix about themselves. Like,
yeah.
there's systemic stuff. So fast forward to the year later, when the HR club membership, they'd said to me, I want an in-person get together. And I was like, oh, that can't be difficult. It's just getting people in a room. And and you, right,
If you knew then what you know now.
right. It's a lot of learning. And you were one of the first speakers at the
Hmm.
very first HR Big Meet
I was
event.
indeed.
And you shared your story from stage. Now, do you remember your story? What you shared on that
Oh God,
stage?
yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's the single biggest thing that's happened to me that totally changed how I work, who I am, what I do. Um, my life would not look like it does today if that hadn't happened to me. So, at the point that I stood up at the big meet and spoke in 2022, it had been 3 years since it happened. So, in a nutshell, I got unceremoniously let go from a role that I had somehow wrapped my entire identity in an organization that I'd worked for over a decade. And, that in itself, okay, losing a job is never fun. It's always difficult, but I didn't have any warning. It was technically a redundancy, but because I was based in the US, there's no such thing as redundancy. So it was just like getting fired. And I think, it was that on its own would have been hard enough, but when I got to the office that day, my pass had already been disabled before they'd
Wow.
told me. And so the first inkling I had, and I didn't get it to start with. It's just now I'm like, oh my God, Kirsty, it was so obvious. I got there and it was the day after Boxing Day. And I wasn't even going to work in the office that day. I was going to work from home. But my boss messaged me and said, no, it would be good if you could come in, please. Of course, I now know why.
Yeah.
He'd flown down on Boxing Day to fire me, basically. So
Wow.
I get to the office and I can't get in. And I thought, oh, something's gone wrong with my pass. So I knocked on the door to reception and made a joke. Our receptionist was this lady called Marlena. And I remember saying, oh, I must have been fired. Ha ha. Because humour is always how I deal with everything. But I still
Right.
didn't think for 1 second that I'd been fired. And Marlena, I remember her saying, you can't get fired, Kirsty. You're the head of HR. And I was like, ha ha ha. And then the office manager appeared and said, Kirsty, could you come with me, please? Name of my boss is here. And I looked at Marlena. I went, oh, shit. I said, I have been fired. The poor girl. Her face just fell. She didn't know what to do with herself. I've apologized to her multiple times since. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I put you on the spot really badly. And so I followed our office manager through, and my boss was sat there with another one of the HR team who'd flown down with him from elsewhere in the States. And of course, then the penny massively dropped. And I don't remember an awful lot else after that. I remember, the usual discussion around any paperwork that you have to sign and what it's going to look like for you to leave. And then they literally handed me a cardboard box and I had to walk through the trading floor, and everybody was like pretending to be busy and looking away, because it's like the walk of shame. Everyone knows what's
Yeah.
happened. And nobody would make eye contact with me. And this is a huge trading floor of like 200 people. Mortified. I felt like Cersei in bloody Game of Thrones. At least I wasn't nude. That's one good thing.
Yeah.
They let me keep my clothes on. And so, yeah, that was how I got let go. And so I went home later that day and got, this is where I kind of, because I was talking about resilience in my talk at the Big Meet. And this is where I realize now that some of the coping mechanisms that I had in place back in 2018 were probably not as healthy or useful as some of the ones that I use now. So my first instinct when I got home was, let's get drunk.
Yeah.
And so my husband and I went round to the local pub, but it was 10 o'clock in the morning, so it wasn't open. We had to go back home again. But that was my response. I got hammered and drunk booked flights to Australia, leaving 2 days later. And it was only when I got to Australia around sort of New Year's Day that it hit me what had happened. And that was the point during that holiday that I realized that I actually didn't have any resilience at all. And I was a complete bowl of jelly, and I didn't know who I was, what I was going to do. I thought no one would ever hire me again. I must obviously be absolutely shit at my job. And I just fell to pieces.
Yeah.
So yeah, massive turning point from there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
how do people get this stuff so wrong in how they handle it? Like, oh my days. But that is obviously something that we
that's by the by. I'm actually nowadays, like, because I'm like 7 years past, I think it's hilarious that they got it so badly wrong. And now it's I use it as a story. It's a source of entertainment. At the time, it broke me.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I hold no ill will. I loved the time I worked for that company. They were a great company. There was just that one individual that I happened to report to that had the, bedside manner of a blooming, I don't know, something without one.
Potato is all I've got in my head.
Potato, yes.
I don't know why. Potato. And what you do when you started that story, you talked about like your identity being wrapped up in your work. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. I know that I certainly felt the same as well. Is that like it's one of the first things that we do, isn't it? Is when you meet someone, who are you? What do you do? Like your job can be such a big part of who you are. And when it's kind of taken away from that, from you in such a way, in such a like dramatic way, it forces you, I suppose, to rethink about things. So and I know at Big Meet you talked about kind of resilience, but I'm interested in like understanding from you how you went about kind of rebuilding your identity after that happening.
Yeah, I mean, it was a journey, and it's interesting because a lot of it came down to confidence in the end, because I had none, and I actually wrote a book last year. Didn't mean to plug this, but I wrote a book last year called The HR Confidence Playbook, which basically is my journey and the process that I followed to rebuild myself after that happened. Didn't realize it was a process at the time, and didn't necessarily do it in the order that I've now written it in the book. But I had a blank sheet of paper. I didn't know who I was, and I had no confidence. So I had to work out from scratch, how did I want to show up in the world? What was important to me? What are the things that I cared about? So sounds really straightforward, but I work with a number of coaches in what I now call my kind of rebuilding period. And one of them had me do a values exercise. And it had never entered my head that values existed outside of the posters that you have on the wall in organizations, like corporate values. I never thought like people have their own. And so she was like, well, what's important to you? I was like, I don't know. But I've gone about, what I've realized, and it took a while, but realized that being myself, that authenticity, to just be myself and not pretend to be anybody else, is probably my single most, that's the thing I value the most in what I do. So when I say, like that post you talked about, when I say I'm not for everybody, of course I'm not. I'm a tattooed vegan metalhead. And, all three of those things will put people off for different reasons. But the ones that it doesn't put off, those are the people that I want to work with. So sort of working out who I was step one. And then I had to convince myself that I knew what I was doing. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. I had this terrible feeling I must be terrible at my work. So I went back and did some courses just to challenge myself. So I did a strategic HR management program with Cornell University, like a virtual program, and it was really bloody hard. But I wanted that. I didn't want something I could do standing on my head. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to kind of regain my love for working in HR, and that
Yeah.
program gave me that. Like, I was like, oh, I'm really good at this, and I got good marks for some of the assignments, and I learnt things that I didn't know. And so that was really important, I think, for me to sort of believe that I knew what I was doing. And then I did my coaching qualification because I thought, again, these will be skills that will be useful to me. I had no plans to become a coach. I just thought that coaching skills would be helpful, and I wanted to find out more about it. And about halfway through that program, I was like, actually, I can do this, but if I do, I'm only going to coach HR professionals.
Mm.
So I ended up, through this rebuilding process, post getting fired, I ended up with an entirely new skill set and new direction to go from a work perspective. So that was kind of
Just
a
that
big change.
kind of big change. It's amazing, isn't it? And I wonder why we don't do that process of evaluation of like who we are and knowing who we are when we're in employment. I don't know if maybe people do these days, but I know for me, I went through the same thing of um yeah, knowing what do I want. I kind of got to a position in my career where I thought, oh, I've got the job title and I've got the salary that I thought I wanted. But then it feels a bit hollow. I'm not sure I'm
Mm.
enjoying it. I'm still dealing with the same old stuff. It doesn't feel any different. So, and then that kind of prompted me to go through I call it, it's my step, my process is the redefine, is the first stage of like, yeah,
Yeah.
that values piece and knowing what it is that you want for yourself and
Mm.
what do you want your career to look like and how do you want your career to interact with your life. Why don't we do that when we're in corporate? Like, why does it take something?
Do you know, I think we do it with different aspects of life as well. So I used to call it the conveyor belt. That we are socially conditioned and also expected to follow a certain path in life. Like you leave school, you go to university, you get a job, you meet a person, you get married, you have babies, you buy a house, not necessarily in that order, but it is like a conveyor belt of
Yeah.
expectations that are there.
Yes.
And when you're working in an organization, you're expected to toe the line, operate in a way that the organization sees as appropriate, not argue too much, all of those. So there's this like, I felt like I was on a conveyor belt for the first, how old would I have been when I got let go? 45? So the first 45 years of my life, I was on a conveyor belt. Now, I'd already made some non-conveyor belt choices because I consciously never wanted to have children. And so that was, that was a big deal for people. And I didn't
Mm.
get married until I was 44. I was, with a partner for 17 years, didn't get married. So I'd already made some kind of choices that weren't expected, but never at work. I'd always towed the line at work. And so coming out of this, I think that's one of the reasons we don't question it. We
Mm.
don't ask what we want because we're not led to believe that it's important. I think what's important in the corporate world is that you do a good job for your organization. What you want isn't a consideration.
Yeah.
I would
That
never have put my head above the parapet and disagreed with people or argued with them out of this fear of losing my job.
yeah.
And to be blunt, it was a real fear. I actually had people say to me, if you can't do this, we'll find someone else that can.
Yeah.
Or if you won't do this, we'll find someone else that can. That threat was always there.
Mm.
It was pretty cutthroat. But so we don't spotlight our own needs, desires, or wants because nobody else thinks they're important.
Oh, that is such like an amazing mic drop moment. We could just kind of leave it there, but um, uh, obviously it's now been 4 years since the first Petrol Big Meet that you shared this story the first
Yeah.
time. 7 years since it all happened, and I'm really interested to understand how does your authenticity show up in your work these days? I know the answer, but for the listeners.
Everywhere. Um, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I don't work in corporate anymore. But in the last two corporate roles that I did post getting fired, I showed up very, very differently. So
Mm,
I wouldn't stand for people raising their voice to me, whereas
no.
I had accepted that. So for those that don't know, my background was almost entirely financial services, oil trading, stockbrokers, investment banks. It's a certain type of culture, toxic. Um, and I had put up with an awful lot from people over the years. I won't anymore. That's one of my biggest non-negotiables
Yeah.
is you don't get to talk to me like that. I'm a grown woman. And I have this kind of, if you wouldn't put up with it in Sainsbury's, you don't have to put up with it at work. So if
Yeah.
somebody started screaming at you in the supermarket about something, you'd tell them to stop or you'd walk away. But at work, no, that doesn't happen anymore. So I showed up very, very differently in my last two HR roles because I wasn't accepting that anymore. And it was interesting because in one of them, there was a senior leader who was, oh God, he was such a shouter. It was hilarious. I had to turn my camera off on SLT meetings because he was so rude to people. I'd be laughing my head off, and so I'd have to keep my camera off. But he tried it with me once on Teams, started screaming, and I remember just going, "Can you stop shouting, please? I'm right here." Like super calm, and he just stopped dead in his tracks. And you could see, and I remember sitting there thinking, I was trying not to laugh because I was like, mate, you're in your late 50s and you're screaming
Yeah.
your head off at a professional woman. Like, what is your problem?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I think something switched in my mind. Like, it's not about me. This is how he is choosing to respond to this situation. Here is someone who cannot handle stress and doesn't know how to articulate their words without shouting. And I just thought, no, I'm not taking it. So that's the first thing. Like, I won't take that crap from anybody anymore. I just won't. And in terms of authenticity, it's just, I get to choose now who I work with. I get to choose how I show up. I've created an event that is completely bonkers, that just allows people to be themselves, whatever that looks like. And that feels good. I feel like I'm doing work that enables people to take action on the things that are important to them, the things that they need and that they want that they might not get from anywhere else. So
Yeah. It's amazing. And what's in my head is your walk-on music that you chose for the HR Big Meet.
oh
I
yeah,
play the playlist for the HR Big Meet sometimes, and
you
I still have
skip
to
it,
skip
don't
it.
you? Goodness
every
sake.
time. Every time I'm just like, I can't. My brain, no, it could just
Do you
can't.
know what? Okay, so the song that I chose was called Bounce by System of a Down. And I chose Bounce because I was talking about resilience. And
Yes.
people always talk about bounce back ability. But to the
Yeah.
untrained ear, it just sounds like a man shouting. But, when I spoke at the Great Geek Together last year, I walked onto the Sisters of Mercy, which is like, goes back to the, original goth stuff from when I was a teenager. And when we were at Wellnergy last year, I walked onto Rob Zombie because I'm just like, this is me. Like,
Yes.
if I walked on to something like Sia, anybody who knows me would be like, what's
And
going
also,
on?
it's my song. So what
I
you?
know,
I
and
mean,
it's a
you just
great song,
tell
don't
him.
get me wrong. I am also an unashamed pop fan. I have this massive Girls Aloud thing, like old
Yeah.
school. I love Girls Aloud. But
Yeah.
it would seem weird. If you walked onto Rob Zombie, people would be like, what the hell is going
Yeah.
on? That'd be funny if they switched our tracks. People would
We
be
should
so
do it.
confused.
We should your next event. We should just go like as each other.
I should make everybody walk onto a death metal track this year,
Yeah.
and you'd all be
It's
like
your event.
weeping by the
It's
track.
your
Because you're
event. I
talking,
would
aren't
weep.
you? You're
I
talking,
am
evolving
talking.
this year.
You can't shut me up these days.
No.
So I always have this question when we're talking about authenticity of like both of us now are outside the corporate world, so we're not in the shackles of all those expectations that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And I'm always there's always a niggle in my brain. Can that exist? Can that level of authenticity exist in a corporate workspace? I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I believe there's degrees of it. So
Exactly
what
that.
would your advice be to help people show up a little bit more of themselves in work?
I hate the word boundaries, but I do think it is possible to set some parameters for yourself around the things that you will and won't accept. And like I said, I refuse to tolerate people screaming at me. And you can ask people to stop without coming across as rude, without endangering your employment or anything like that, because I did it. I know you can do it.
Yeah, same.
I think sometimes we're fearful that if we, put up a barrier, that something bad's going to happen. But you can do all of these things in a way that aren't rude. I also think we can get an awful lot better at setting parameters around our role and responsibilities, because this is something that HR, we get asked to do a lot of things that technically have nothing to do with HR.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say no. And it's one of the things that I also talk about in the book, is that there are lots of different ways of not saying yes that aren't rude and don't necessarily mean no, never. It might be not now. It might be, here's somebody who can do that, but it ain't me. There are lots of different ways that you can approach these situations so that you can maintain your own boundaries, but without being rude to someone. So I do definitely think that there are things that you can change. And what's really interesting with the loud, shouty people and that behavior towards HR that we shouldn't have to tolerate, like with the guy that I spoke to, most of them aren't used to getting called out on it.
No.
And when you do, they don't really know how to behave. I remember calling
No.
someone into my office once and saying, you cannot stand up in the middle of the trading floor and scream at one of your team members like that. It makes you look foolish. And he just looked at me and said, you don't know what he did. I said, it doesn't matter what he
No.
did. You're the one that looked like a fool in that situation. I said, people will not take you seriously. It's unprofessional. It looks like you can't control your emotions. And he just kind of sat there and went, okay, could I shout at him in a meeting room? And I said, seriously. And I said, I wouldn't recommend that you shout at him at all, because there are way better ways that you can have a conversation. But I would rather that any of those conversations don't take place in an open floor with everybody.
Yeah.
But he accepted that. He didn't get aggressive with me. It was a good
meeting in a room.
conversation. Oh my God.
Stop. This is what we're dealing with. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. I could write a book about that individual.
I'm
Just
sure.
a whole book about that particular individual.
Oh my
I never won't,
goodness.
and I won't name people because that's not fair, but
Yeah, it's just anyway. So as we approach the end of the convo, we've got to stop talking at some point, even though I could. There's just been multiple routes that we could have gone down this conversation, but as a kind of like last piece of advice for anyone who's kind of listening to your story, resonating with any of it, and thinking, well, what do I do to be more Kirsty? Not that you need to be more Kirsty, you need to be more you.
Maybe more you, yeah.
Be more you. What do you have any kind of last advice or words of wisdom that you would want to share?
I would strongly advise everybody to just take the time to understand what's important to them and what are the things that they know deep down they shouldn't be tolerating at work, and how could they take a step towards not tolerating that? Because you don't have to suffer. You don't have to work in a way that goes against who you are, and you certainly don't have to suffer rudeness from people. But yeah, that would be it. Just take the time to work out, am I in a situation that feels right to me? Does it align with who I am? Am I okay with how everybody's treating me? And if the answer's no to some of that, I mean, you only ever have three options, don't you? You do nothing about it, you do something about it, or you leave the organisation and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it's worth actually thinking about it.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much for chatting with me and for sharing your stories across all the events and all the times that we've kind of worked together. So
I'm not very happy with all of the pink, but I'll live with it.
I didn't make you wear pink. I could have made you
did
wear
not
pink.
make me wear pink. You reckon you could have made me wear pink?
It's happened once, so now I know
it has
it's possible.
happened once. Yeah, that's true.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thanks, Emma.
Now, let's make this mean something. As ever, I'm not letting you get away with just listening to a brilliant conversation. We need to turn it into action and do something with it. And that is exactly what I'm going to invite you to do now. The thing that I want to pick up on from this episode is what Kirsty said about her coping mechanisms. Her coping mechanisms when she lost her job was to impulse buy a holiday and drink wine, I think, and the pub wasn't open at the time that she wanted to go and do that, if you remember that from the conversation that we had. Now, for me, there's something here around, yes, what are our mechanisms that we employ for ourselves when something goes wrong or something doesn't go to plan? But also, what are the mechanisms that we could introduce to build up our resources, our cup, our whatever we have access to, so that when things don't go to plan, they don't have such a big impact on us? Most of us pay very, very little attention to that. We walk around like we're heads on sticks. We don't really know what we need to get ourselves to a point of even being okay. So that's what I want you to focus on this time is, where are you not meeting your own needs? Where are you neglecting or not even conscious of the things that are getting you to okay? This is a part of a bigger part of teaching that I would do with my one-to-one clients. But broadly speaking, there's 4 main categories of need. Physiological, that gets your body to a place of being okay and not unwell. Psychological, that has you being free of stress and worry. Relational, so that tops you up in relation to connection to other people. And spiritual, which is your connection to something bigger than yourself. So you've got 4 categories of needs. Most of us really only know that we have physiological needs and we're still not meeting them, right? So if you were to focus on those areas of needs and just for a moment believe that they could unlock for you extra energy, extra ability to cope with things, get you to a point of being able to cope with life, not like singing from the hymn sheet, that's not the phrase. Swinging from the chandeliers, that's the phrase. Not the things that have you feeling like that, but just simply get you be feeling powerful, centered and well on a regular basis. If we accepted those 4 categories of things as the things that we need to get to that point, then what is it that you could be focusing on right now that could top you up to be able to deal with whatever challenges come your way? Give it a go, have a think. Tell me what you think about it. What do you mean the spiritual needs? What are you even talking about, Emma? Well, exactly. That's my point. We're sometimes so detached from ourselves, from the things that we really need, that kind of stuff, it doesn't even feature. So have a think. Physiological, psychological, relational, and spiritual. What could you be focusing on right now? A really small step that's going to help you feel powerful, centered, and well more regularly. If you have enjoyed this episode, can I ask you a favour? Please could you interact, leave a review, share it with your friends, do whatever you can to help get this in front of other women in HR who might need to hear the stories that we're sharing. Thank you. I appreciate you.